All right, 97.7 Outlaw Radio FM listeners, you already know what time it is. And right here, we actually have a hip-hop pioneer that has a career spanning since the 1970s. This individual is responsible for discovering the legendary Positive K, and he also managed phenomenal artists like LL Cool J. But I'm not here to tell his story. This man is here to tell his story for all of us. We got the one and only Sweety G, Mr. Sweety G, that is, right here, live on the line. How are you doing this evening?
Doing good, brother. Glad to be here, Mortal.
I gotta say, it's definitely an honor, man, just being able to chop it up with hip hop royalty like yourself, man. I hope your weekend has been going well as well, man. It's pretty sad to say that Monday is almost upon us.
Yeah, it's a good weekend, stretching it out, ready to get busy.
But also, Sweetie, I know you're a very busy individual, man, so I'm gonna dive right into this broadcast, but I want to bring you back to the 1970s, man, because I know a lot of individuals, they didn't really get the opportunity to really experience the golden age of hip hop in the very beginning. So as we all know, you're one of the hip hop pioneers that dates back to the very beginning. I was wondering if you could actually tell us a bit more about the atmosphere and, of course, what was the culture like at the very beginning of hip hop?
I mean, for the beginning, me being in Queens, with Cool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, and everybody uptown Bronx and Manhattan. In Queens, it was we had the opportunity of looking on the other side of the ropes and developing what we felt reflected our community, our neighborhood, the schools we went to, what Queens looks like. It's a suburban area with a city edge to it. So during that time, I was in junior high school, making my way up through high school. It was an art form that was developing. It was just like a hobby or something that you would do. Some people would say, I guess, ham radio or playing ball or something that was new that you didn't know how long it was going to last or what it would be. But we never thought it would grow to be $1 billion business. I never imagined that the pioneers before me would accept me and that I would actually be a cornerstone in this hip-hop religion.
And I gotta say as well, man, just being able to experience the very beginning, man, and being able to see how hip hop has kind of evolved throughout the years. I have to ask. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of new music out there, and we actually spoke on the phone. We spoke about that. But how do you feel about how hip hop has evolved throughout the years?
I mean, I'm a purist to it. I don't want to be a snob. I think it's more about preserving what we created and what we did than it is limiting what the new audience is doing, because I have respect for these kids. They're speaking through their eyes, their hearts, their feelings. They have their own language, and we don't want to limit and censor people. We want people to have their freedom, but we got to preserve the essence of hip-hop, because there will be a time when it comes back with essence, when we get back to the basics. And if people continue to erase the history of it and not listen to the native voices of hip-hop culture, then it won't be what it is. The spirit of it will definitely die. I mean, more recently, we just saw they came up with some stupid A1 bot they would put millions and millions of dollars in, and we're signing for millions of dollars. And the spirit of hip-hop, the culture, the community, made whoever was behind this uncomfortable. So we got to keep it pure.
And I got to say, I definitely agree. I always find the mainstream took the wrong turn, but I find there is still some great hip-hop artists out there that still actually hold the essence of hip-hop, and of course the elements of it as well, man. Throughout the underground and the independent circuit, man, there's so many artists out there that are recent that if you listen to them, you're like, man, like, are you sure you're not a 1980s or late 90s rapper? And they're like, no, man, I just started like a couple years ago, and they're phenomenal.
Yes, that spirit, the newness of it. They should probably have other categories, because if they continue to strip hip-hop down, it becomes R&B or it's some other genre. But the essence of the spiritual component of it, breakdancing, graffiti, DJing, I mean, all of these elements have to be preserved. And if you look at some of the biggest records that are made, none of those elements are in it. That's my problem. It's not my problem with the rappers. It's a problem with lack of preservation.
And also as well, in the year 1981, you actually released your 12-inch vinyl single, actually titled "At the Place to Be" on New Star Record Inc. I was wondering if you can actually tell us a bit more about this very early hip hop record, and of course, what was it like just working alongside executive producer Charles Fisher?
Well, Charles Fisher, I had a great history with him. I went on to manage Cool J with him, Brian Latour, and the whole team. But Charles was a childhood friend, was doing management. My brother Randall was my manager from day one. Him and a brother named Reggie Smith. You know, it was just a crew. Like, we really worked. So the way you see all these gangs and these brothers that can't work together, we worked together. That was part of the joy. You know, whether it was breaking up a sandwich or breaking up the dollar, it was a good thing. But in that time that record came out, we hustled up all of our money, went to the pressing plant, learned about distribution, learned about one stops, put the record in the system. It was critically acclaimed, made some noise underground. I didn't have the big major distribution like my brothers, the Dougie Fresh and Biz, and all my brothers who I played with for years, traveled around the city, winning all these battles. But my record career was limited to one or two recordings, because I think I was more on the business side. That's what led me to discover Positive K and look outside myself.
And also, as well, you were actually a member of the phenomenal hip-hop group, Cultural Vibe. I was wondering, what is the story behind this pioneering group? And, of course, how did you actually originally get connected with Winston Jones?
So what happened, that's when I decided I wasn't going to continue to rap, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in music. I knew I couldn't live without it. So for me, it was a hybrid, right? So I could still have lyrics to make my message. It had a strong beat that would work in hip-hop clubs, dance clubs, house clubs. The traditional dance and disco wasn't my style. And it was in a predominantly European, more gay audience, more downtown kind of audience, so I didn't really fit in that scene. So I approached it as R&B hip-hop. So I came to Winston Jones. We would put together on Easy Street Records. We started putting out these tribal kind of house records. You had like I Will House You and a lot of house hip-hop artists. So that was kind of natural for me to get in that space. From there, I continued as the lead singer, because I was a singing rapper, and I took singing very seriously, and I became a singing R&B guy doing the hip-hop thing with Mind Games, Power, and it led to a lot of airplay, and I went on to produce other records. I produced Sybil, You're the Love of My Life, working with a lot of R&B artists and soul artists, and that was the way I put my microphone down as a battle MC and started the emergence of my career in entertainment.
And while we're still actually on the topic of Cultural Vibe, in 1986, you guys actually released released their first single, actually titled "Mind Games." I was wondering if you can actually just tell our listeners the story behind this particular release, and of course, has it ever since been released on the internet, so the newer generation can kind of check out and hear the very first single from Cultural Vibe?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because first it was Mafumbe, the initial release from Cultural Vibe. Then I went on to do the R&B. I'd say, yeah, it's an R&B soul dance record. And Fred Buggs, who was one of the biggest DJs fighting for hip-hop at that time on WBLS, and then he went to 98.7 Kiss, they added it in full rotation, and the record went insane. It became a national, I'd say it was a radio hit in regional areas, Baltimore, New York, LA, stuff like that. And I was on Easy Street, so the royalties and the money and the reporting with the mystery and the sciences of what goes on in the music industry. But it was enough to garner interest on a global level that I went around the world and toured. I eventually signed to Capitol Records as Glenn Sweety G. Toby on the Black Havana album with a lot of other artists, and went on to continue to produce.
And I gotta say, just being able to sign to Capitol Records must have been such a, such a monumental experience for yourself, you know, because I believe around those times, Capitol Records was just starting to sign hip-hop acts.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I think they had Mellow Man Ace, since I was there just before Hammer came. And I was making a lot of noise with this record called Somebody to Love Me. And they were about to go crossover radio and break out on it. They said, we just signed this guy named Hammer. Hammer and his brother were geniuses. They went in, created marketing programs, sales programs, hired their own team, built infrastructure. We all ended up getting dropped off the Capitol. And that's when I started crossing over into business, and then eventually in the sports world and NFL as a sports agent. I just kept moving.
And also, Cultural Vibe also went on to perform all across the United States and, of course, internationally in Europe as well. From what you actually can recall from this international and nationwide tour, what was one of your most fondest memories you shared during during this tour?
What I loved was merging. I would always rap it on my records that were dance records. My records were kind of like a R&B. I don't know if people are familiar with Colonel Abrams or like R&B, crossover dance. It was never like the disco dance, what I performed. So there was always like a b-boy element to it. Whether I was dancing, rocking the mic, singing, going back and forth, and then getting a chance to, tour the world off my talent was a miracle. I had a lot of fun, and I was able to still hold up the hip-hop flag while still doing, the singing thing.
And also, of course, like, because, this was like the mid to late 80s, so obviously this kind of music was still very new to a lot of individuals. So going overseas, how did they perceive your guys' music? Did they welcome you with open arms, or did you really have to warm up the crowd before they really actually gave you guys a real chance?
They treated us like pop stars. I was performing on television. I played at Brixton Academy, some of the biggest venues, touring across the country with riders, making nice money, And people would ask for autographs because house music and dance music over there is massive. It is big. So they would look into my, because we didn't have the internet. It wasn't fully developed at that time. But people would do their research and see that the hip-hop part was a part of it. Then the B-boys would come down to dance because they like to dance with the hip-hop and the house music thing. And then I'm straight singing R&B soul with a combination of the DJ behind it, so it was a different thing. I mean, Europe, London, and I'd say foreign territories have embraced hip-hop and soul music, since the beginning of time.
And also, as I mentioned during the intro to this interview, you were also the individual responsible for discovering the legendary Positive K. I was wondering if you can actually tell our listeners a detailed story behind this, and of course, how did you originally discover Positive K?
Well, I went to school with Positive's sister. She was in my class, and I remember seeing him. He was this quiet kid with so much flair and style. He was a little too young to have all the clothes and the chains, but he had a crazy swag, and I'd be playing ball, rapping, come to my concerts. Paz was from the Bronx. He had first moved to Queens, and he knew my rhymes, and he said, man, I got rhymes too. Yeah, Paz, stuff like this. And I just listened to him, and he was developing and developing. He had a fire, and he was like lightning in a bottle, and nothing could contain him. So I had the honor of producing his first record, co-writing with him. I'm getting paid. It was his first recording. He did really well. I did that with Mike and Dave, who had the Crash Crew, Barry B. and the brothers, and Daryl C. And that record took off underground and got him signed to become the Positive K. I'm just honored, man. I saw him in the neighborhood, saw he was talented, and managed him. My brother was a part of it, too. My brother was also one of the managers. My brother was an investor in my career, too. But I had the joy of finding this brother, man, and watching what he's done. He's still performing, and a comedian and just doing it. One of my dearest friends.
And I gotta say, I've had the opportunity to interview Positive K twice, and I gotta say, such a phenomenal individual and such a legendary individual at that. Since I've been in the music industry, so many of these legends have been just so amazing and so nice, man. But I gotta say, Positive K is definitely a huge supporter of our station, man. So it's actually cool being able to interview someone like him, and then of course interview the individual that actually discovered him as well.
It's an honor for me to be here, and what you guys are doing in Canada is crazy. I mean, your broadcast is so effective. People are listening to it around the world. So to all my people out there in Canada, I love it. I had a record called Wake Up. It was a dance record, much music. Toronto has an amazing scene. Montreal, the entire country, the nation of Canada has been so good to R&B, soul, house, and the music of rhythm, reggae, and everything. So shout out to my brothers and sisters in Canada and what you're doing at Outlaw Radio. You're a visionary, brother. We're glad to have the airways and people will be able to hear us.
I gotta say, I definitely appreciate the recognition, man. It definitely means a lot coming from an individual like yourself. But before we move off the topic of Positive K, I do want to bring up, because I do know how you mentioned that you actually produced Positive K's first solo record, Getting Paid. And I gotta ask as well, because I know that song was actually included on the album Fast Money, the 1986 compilation featuring Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock. I was wondering if you can actually tell us a bit more about that. And of course, were you the individual responsible for getting that song placed on that compilation?
Yeah, so basically I was, so Mike and Dave, remember they had Crash Crew, and Mike and Dave went around and picked some new MCs that were emerging. And look, Rob Bates came out of it, right? It Takes Two. Look how much talent came out of it. So I was a partner with Mike and Dave as a promoter. We would go around all 5 boroughs doing shows, concerts, mini concerts, and I was involved. I invested in that one particular record, that compilation, and that's how Paz got on it. He tested the record, too, and it did really well. You know, from the Mr. Magic days to playing it in clubs and college radio stations, and it blew for Paz. It did so well for him that he ended up moving on to his next label.
And also, I know you mentioned earlier on in the interview about how yourself and Charles Fisher actually had the opportunity to just manage the legendary LL Cool J. I was wondering if you can actually just give us a little bit more detail on that. And of course, like, what was it like just being able to be LL Cool J's manager? Because he was such a he was and still is such a larger than life, not only MC but also now actor as well.
Well, you know, Brian Latour was his manager from the beginning. Brian's one of my childhood friends, good brother. And from there, when they transitioned from Brian to Charles was managing him solely. Then I joined the team, and I brought negotiating skills and business development for the infrastructure of our Cool J's production, his shows, the television show, all the workings on the inside of it. And Charles was pretty much in the office, and it was Charles, myself, and a bunch of other guys in the team. It was an honor for me to have come before him, and Cool J used to come to my shows, right, before he was a rapper. Him, Run DMC, so many other brothers in Queens. And then somehow I end up being on his management team, who was one of my favorite MCs. So it's amazing how, you know, we all come back together. That's why it's so important for these new rappers to remember sometimes the tide turns, and it's important to preserve the legends and the OGs. So by me working with Cool J, he was preserving my career on an executive level that allowed me to go on to develop from entertainment, music entertainment, into sports.
And also, before we move off the topic of that, because obviously you must have shared a lot of you know, personal moments and a lot of amazing times with LL Cool J, because you did a lot of behind the scenes work. What is one of your most fondest memories of just being LL Cool J's manager?
I think the greatest thing was his wit, his speed, how smart he was. People, you know, always looked at him like just a rapper, and so we were the managers just making these decisions. But this guy was always 2 steps ahead of himself. You know, he had to catch up to himself, and it shows in everything he's doing. Always an innovator. But I'd say it's just comedic. Like, he was the funniest guy in the world when we'd be talking about business or critiquing things or making strategy sessions with the team. But way ahead of his time, brilliant. Proud of him.
And also, you actually went on to build the Queens Village recording studio alongside your brother, Randall Toby. I was wondering, what actually made yourself and your brother decide to launch this studio? And of course, since it has been built, who are some of the legendary acts and artists that had the opportunity to record on your premises?
Run from Run DMC did a song there. Guy came through there. There's so many a lot of dance artists, Barbara Tucker, Jay Williams, a lot of people, but it was my brother and I, Randall. It was our idea to put our money together right there in the apartment. We put in not an SSL, but we had we must have spent about $50,000 back then, which would be like a couple $100,000. And we put a tape machine in there with state-of-the-art equipment. This was just when MIDI and digital was emerging, and we had total vertical integration. We had rehearsing. We were managing other artists. We were managing people like Shake the Dancer. My brother Randall had managed me, then we transitioned, became partners, and he and I were managing everybody else. So that was amazing. And he's a legend. Shout out to my brother Randall.
And also, because we have a lot of independent artists and legends that do listen to this radio station. So if any of them are listening, and of course are intrigued just by Queens Village Recording Studio, how can they go about booking themselves some studio time with yourself and your brother Randall?
Well, now, you know, we transitioned from one physical with COVID and everything. They can get to us directly. If it's music, film, television, sports, you know, my IG is Glenn Toby. Or Mr. Sweety G, DM me. You can go to my website, mrsweetyg.com or glenntoby.com. And we're in film, television, We're in music and we're in technology, real estate. We do different forms of business. My brother's emerging and doing some pretty interesting things as well. So we have separate companies, but, we're family. We still work together.
And also, in the year 1998, you actually founded a nonprofit organization titled the Book Bank Foundation. I was wondering if you can actually tell us a bit more about this particular organization, and of course, how can individuals today become more involved and support?
Yeah, well, I was homeless from the 8 years old to the 7th grade, and my brother and I were homeless. We bounced around with relatives and, had a lot of social support, welfare systems, charity, people that loved us. And through education, we were able to emerge to end up being thought leaders and having a strong life. So I thought of what was it that allowed me to get through my tough youth, right? And it was education. So I thought of there's the bank, the spiritual bank, there's a financial bank, there's a memory bank, and there's a bank where you hold your emotions and your heart. So I thought of book bank for education. We put that together, and it's a not-for-profit that's been around for 26 years. Now what we do is we do modalities, workshops. We work all across the country. Currently, we have a feeding program called Groceries to Grow. The CEO, David Branch, is working on moving that around the nation. We've done really well with that. We're feeding 2,000 people, 2 tons of food a week, average of 600 families for 2.5 years. We just did an aviation camp in New York with John Addison, who's a commercial airline pilot. And we're developing other programs with professional football players, Alex Bush. So I have a whole team of celebrities and people all across the country. Shout out to my brother D. Anthony Johnson, who is in New York City. He runs that chapter. He's a famous engineer. And we're just going out doing charity work, man. We think the give back is what it's about.
And I got to say, not a lot of individuals like yourself do these phenomenal things for their community. So I have to ask as well, is there a place where individuals can actually bring some non-perishable food items to actually help to get more involved with your organization? Like, how can they go about really donating, whether it's like, snowsuits, food, or just even like money donations? How do they go about doing this to actually support your organization?
Oh, wow. Thanks, Mortal. The best way to do it is to go to the THEBBF.org. Check out what we're doing. Take a look at that. If you want to make donations, we accept donations as well. Everything goes directly to the foundation. It is a 501c. It is completely charity-based. We own no properties. We don't have any salaries. We take no write-offs. And that's the money sign at Book Bank Foundation. That's a 501c3. If it's a heavy donation, if it takes shipping, or if it's just money, or you want to show up and support us in some of the cities we're in, just DM us at THEBBF.
And also as well, you recently actually got honored by the amazing Universal Hip Hop Museum, where they actually gave you an award for your contribution to the hip hop culture. I was wondering if you can actually tell us a bit more about that experience, and of course, what was it like just being one of the very first individuals recognized by this phenomenal organization?
It was amazing. I mean, this is an amazing build. The museum will be done 2024. They're spending upwards of $10-20 million on it. I mean, you look at culture, if you look at it on a historical level, on a global level, on an art level, here is something that's less than 50 years old, that comes from blood, sweat, and tears, poverty, people from indigenous nations, people, white, black, Chinese, Asian, everybody coming together at the end of the term in the first 100 years of this greatness. And for me to be one of the pioneers, one of the first people last year, and to get the award and to see my flyers in there and to be a part of it is incredible. It's like a dream come true. And I think more recently, we just saw the biggest auction of, I think, upwards of $800,000. Kool Herc had a bunch of his memorabilia and his flyers went for auction, and I was in those flyers, on those flyers in that lot. So it just keeps getting better every day.
And I actually watched the ceremony and saw the news reports. It even reached Canadian news as well, man. I actually saw that LL Cool J was there and so many other legendary individuals that helped break ground. So I'm definitely excited for 2024, and I'm glad we actually know the year it's actually about to open. That way I can actually plan my trip across the border to come and walk through those doors the same day it opens, man, because it would definitely be an honor just to be able to experience such a phenomenal museum, because I'm seeing what they're doing, and I'm I know darn well it's definitely gonna hold up.
Well, the way you're moving, Immortal, they're going to be calling you before 24, bro. For sure. I mean, everybody, I'm looking at the program. I'm honored to be on the show. I see the legends that you have. I mean, current, new, old. I mean, you're all across the board. So, you know, you are part of this family, this hip-hop family. And everybody make sure you continue to tune in and tune on to Outlaw Radio and support the Immortal one.
I definitely appreciate the love and recognition, man. I just grew up a hip-hop fan, and I realized kind of like what you were saying, how this new mainstream stuff, I'm not satisfied with it, man. So I'm here to bring real hip hop back, and if this is what I got to do to bring it back, then by God, this is what I'm gonna do.
Good. I'm glad to be a part of your movement, brother.
But I gotta ask, Sweety G, what is next for yourself, man? Because I do know that we only touch base on like a sliver of your iconic career here this evening. But is there anything else we actually missed that you still want to speak about? Well, we still got you here live on 97.7 FM this evening.
Well, you know, it's interesting because now, you know, most of my business is in consulting. It's in the financial world or it's in corporate development. I still work with athletes. You know, I was involved in sports business as an agent. You know, with Alonzo Shavers, we did $300 million in business. We eventually sold the company. I was part of the reason why Asante Samuel made that $64 million. I was in the negotiation. Countless other players, Josh Evans, Damian Robinson. So after the sports piece, I'm still involved in sports to a great degree, and I've had the honor of representing Jason Mitchell, and as an actor who was in Straight Outta Compton, Jason Weaver, and so many other actors. And so I'm still in the entertainment space, but mostly as an entrepreneur and an investor. So that's what we have coming up. And we're just praying for the world to find peace and find a piece of this thing that we call hip-hop, put it in their heart, and hopefully that'll turn it around.
And I gotta say, when you actually had the opportunity to meet the individual that portrayed Eazy, I gotta say, it still blows my mind how similar he looks to Eazy. Whenever I would see him in any other film, I'm just like, there's Eazy.
Yeah, Jason's amazing. He's got a bunch of new films coming out, a bunch of projects coming out. You know, everybody's just concentrating on their art, building their business. We're in the toughest times of our time, you know, and we just got to keep emerging, and the arts are important, and it never leaves me. I'm always doing something in music, and I love art. You know, I have a collection, something called King's Exhibition. I own two of Jean-Michel Basquiat's finest works. One's called Renzo, one's called Per Capita, and we're going to be moving that around the hip-hop nation, too, for people to come out and check it out. That's called thekingsexhibition.com. So I'm doing some things in the art space. I think when money and art come together, we can move the world.
And also, Mr. Sweety G, this is the time in the interview that I give a chance for the individual that does slide into the radio station airwaves, just a chance to give, like, shout-outs to whomever they want to give shout-outs to, but most of all, your social media handles. That way our listeners can follow you and stay updated on everything you got going on, past, present, and, of course, future, if they're not already doing so.
Sure. Mr. Sweety G, MrSweetyG. I'm always giving off the music and the DJing. You know, I'm on radio. I still do. I think I play an open format, mostly dance house, throwing some hip-hop, some soul classics. It's called the Global Dance Party in Freshest FM. That's on Saturdays at 8 o'clock. So I'm still on the music side, on the business side. Glenn Toby. It's Dr. Glenn Toby online if anybody wants to do business or see the body of my work. DRGLENN with two N's, TOBY.com. And Facebook is my name. Same thing, Glenn Toby or Mr. Sweety G.
And I gotta say, thank you so much, man, for just giving us a bit of your time here this evening. I gotta say, when I reached out to you, I'm not gonna lie, I was not expecting to actually hear back from you, man, because you're such a hip-hop pioneering legend, man. But just being able to chop it up with you and talk about your history and talk about what you got going on currently and what you had going on in the past, man, it was such an honor just to be able to speak with you. And I really do hope that one day we can actually meet in person. But for now, definitely enjoy the rest of the few hours of the weekend that we all got left, and hopefully down the line we can make this happen again sometime soon, Mr. Sweety G.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me. Shout out to Canada, everybody around the world that's listening to. I'm so honored.
Hey, you are most certainly welcome, Sweety. Thank you so much, man, and definitely have yourself a phenomenal night.
Thank you.